Well, welcome. Things are changing. Kids are going back to school. Everybody's excited. And we have the master of ceremonies for this event, our superintendent. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin McIntyre. I'm the superintendent of the Milford Public Schools. It's always a pleasure to be here on your show, Al.
Now, why don't we start with an overall view of the status of the school system? Because I understand big changes are starting today.
Yeah, so a couple weeks out. Let me dial it back a couple weeks ago. So a few weeks ago, we started back full in with the elementary students, and it was actually just a fantastic day when they came back into the building. Both the teachers and the students were all smiling, and it was great. Like classmates who'd never seen each other for the entire year, except virtually, were finally in person together. So it was actually pretty awesome. So we're really excited about that. And then yesterday, our middle and high school students all came back, and that's gone very well also. So it feels like we're moving more towards normal, which is a really, really good feeling.
So now, is there a big difference on bringing back, the elementary kids versus the high school kids?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One is, with the high school students, they're shifting from class to class. Same with the middle school students, so that's a little trickier. The other piece is lunch, and lunch was our biggest obstacle actually, and an obstacle might be the wrong word, but our biggest challenge coming back because we had lunch set up for basically about 125 to 150 kids per like lunch period, and we're basically doubling that. And with the classrooms, we're moving to kind of 3 feet of distance. But when the students have their masks off, we still have to be 6 feet or more of distance. So at Woodland Elementary School, at Stacy Middle School, and the high school, we have lunch spaces and spaces that were used for other things. So we're using at Stacy the auditorium, the gym, the mezzanine, the cafeteria. So they're eating in a lot of different places. And similarly at Woodland, we're in the gym, we're in class, a couple of classrooms that have just become lunch spaces.
Now, the lunch itself, I mean, in the high school, nobody ever worries because you have Carla.
Exactly. We have some of the best lunches, I would say. I put our lunches up against anybody in the country. Carla's team does an awesome job with lunch and breakfast.
But now, realistically, how does that differ school to school? I mean, is there a big difference in what you offer?
It's really choices. I think as the students move up, they get more choices. So at the elementary level, there's usually a hot and a cold option, and when you get to the high school, you have a salad, a sandwich, a hot option, a cold option. So there's a lot of different choices once you get up to the high school level. In terms of how we've managed it, Carl is actually think about if you go to a restaurant, you get the little takeout almost container that looks like a little box. That's how the students are getting their lunches. They're coming in little boxes, so the student will just take the little box lunch, bring it to their space, eat their lunch, and then throw the whole thing away. So it's actually run really, really well. The other thing I just want to share with your viewers is that we're continuing our grab and go program throughout the rest of the school year. So we have lunch and breakfast available from 11 to 1 and 5 to 6 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we offered 2 meals on Monday and Wednesday and 3 meals on Friday to families who pick them up at Memorial Elementary School.
But now, how does that work? Is that for people who have kids in school who are home?
Yeah, correct. Or anybody who has a kid in the school can pick up a meal either during the day or in the evening.
Okay, so it's still meant for school kids, not to help general families.
Yeah, correct. So it's really set up for our school age families through the kind of federal meals program. Um, we still have about 19% of our population kind of finishing the year in the full remote program by those families' choices. So we've got about, depending on the school, somewhere between 80 and 85% of our students back in.
So you're talking 900 kids at the high school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Probably closer to 1,000 at the high school and probably about 800 or 900 at Woodland and Stacy.
Now, how has it worked this year? I mean, for years, I busted your chops about adding one new kid per year.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you surprised me. You walked in and said, aha, here's 250. How did that work this year?
So we're actually down from our peak of about 4,500 last year. And there's two reasons for that. One reason is We limited our capacity in the preschool program. So our preschool program was up above about 200 students. Now, this past year, just for the sake of physical distancing, we're at about 100 students. So that's about 100 of our students that are down. And then we're down about 150, just kind of K through 12, which is not, so we're about 40, I think the last time I checked, we're about 4,300 students right now this year. I'm not sure what next year is going to bring. It's kind of a brave new world to some respect, but like the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen kind of a pretty steady increase in our student population. And we saw a big jump right before the pandemic hit last school year, where we were about 200 and change higher than we are now.
But now, how does that work if you limit preschool? I mean, if I'm a Milford parent and I want to send my child to preschool, you say no to me?
This year we did, because we only have a certain amount of space in the classrooms. So we accommodate every student with special needs, and we had to limit the number of typically developing peers that we kind of allowed in the program, just so we could kind of maintain the level of programming with the space that we had in the classrooms.
So what do those parents do?
They've done a lot of different things. We've seen families go to some of the private, preschools and daycares in town. A number of families actually, and this is another issue why the numbers are down a little bit. We had a redshirting circumstance, meaning that, families who would normally send their child to preschool or to kindergarten decided, hey, with everything going on in the world this year, we're going to just hold off and send our child, next year. So we anticipate slightly larger kindergarten classes. And we do anticipate more robust numbers at preschool again next year. And we're already starting to
get a double wallop.
Yeah, exactly. So I anticipate our numbers, at least at the preschool level, to jump back pretty close to what they were pre-pandemic. And then we're kind of taking a little bit of a wait and see approach in terms of what's going to happen just with general enrollment. I think our kindergarten numbers will probably be a little higher because of that redshirting phenomenon. And that's not unique to Milford. That's happening all over the country. But in terms of like grades 1 through 12, we're already starting to see families kind of re-enrolling students at the Family Resource Center for a variety of reasons, because I think we're starting to see more movement happening, across the state and across the country.
So now, how do you pick the kids? I mean, if you got limited seats.
It's really done by, I think, a lottery system. And so we just kind of bring kids in, and they're selected by lottery, the typically developing students for the preschool. For any student with special needs, we're enrolling those students, and we've been continuing to enroll those students throughout the year. So our numbers have grown as they typically do as students, turn 3 years old and they're eligible for services in the preschool program. So next year we'll probably be able to, again, bring back, 200 plus students like we typically have at the preschool.
Now, how about the rest of the grades? Are we seeing people come back?
We are.
School choice.
Yeah, it's funny this year because I think a lot of districts aren't accepting a lot of school choice students because they just don't have the physical space, and they want to have some predictability in terms of their numbers. That may change next year. I haven't seen the final school choice numbers, but we've been seeing an increase in students choicing in over the last several years as well for a variety of reasons. And I think, a lot of it has to do with, I think, the depth and quality of the programs we offer all the way through the system. I mean, at the high school level, we're offering more languages than any, school around us. We have Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, French. And we also, again, prior to, this past year, but we had a relationship with China. So a number of students took virtual classes in Chinese. So, we have a very, very robust program, huge AP offerings, Project Lead the Way STEM courses, early college. So there's a lot going on, and it all leads up all the way through the district.
So you actually think the school choice numbers are going to shift a little bit better for us?
I think they have been. The gap's been closing. I think the issue with school choice, as Al, is that if we have a student that leaves in kindergarten, they're unlikely to come back just because they develop relationships where they are. The kids become develop friendships, that sort of thing, and they tend to stay. What we typically see though is that the same thing happens when kids school choice in. Wherever they school choice in, they tend to stay. And there's a little bit of churn both ways, but typically, whether a student choices in or choices out, they tend to stay with whatever school they make the choice to go to.
Well, we had talked about hoping that Woodland, in the past we said the old Woodland was not very attractive. Is that a polite way of saying it?
Yeah, I think that's generous.
So we were losing a lot of kids, like you say, in the early years, and then they get entrenched in a separate school system, and pulling them back is not going to happen. Is it worse
No,
the other way?
it's hard to say with the pandemic because we only had a couple years of data from Woodland prior to the pandemic hitting, and I think the next couple years it's going to be very difficult to draw any conclusions because a lot of families, and this is again, a lot of families did some homeschooling. Some families took advantage of private school options. There's a lot of things going on in the last year and a half that are very kind of novel and unique to the pandemic related to education.
But now, I was amazed when I heard that 40-some% of our 4,500 kids are on free lunches or reduced lunches.
Correct.
Are you getting any feedback from families as to, how do they cope? Because some families were paying $600 a week to have somebody be home with their child to help them learn. A lot of the lower income families, they don't make 600 a week some weeks.
Correct. So we have a few programs in town that offer vouchers to families to support childcare. A number of churches offered programming. Some families kind of pooled together, and if I worked the 8 to 4 and you worked the 4 to midnight, there might be switching childcare responsibilities. We saw a lot of those types of scenarios. Developing our, Lisa Kincaid, who's our director of social emotional learning, and Anita Amante, who's one of our social workers, did a lot of work around trying to support families around, some childcare issues, food insecurity. There were some issues around, homelessness that were higher than what we typically see the last couple of years, just because, a lot of folks were losing their jobs or, businesses were closed down. So people weren't able to, physically go to work, and the income wasn't coming in.
Well, if it was in Lisa's hands, I have all the confidence in the world.
100%. She's done an amazing job of connecting, our families who are struggling to, resources that are out there in the community, whether it's at the state level, through charitable organizations, or, we've had one of the things in the pandemic, and I think we've talked about this before, is we've seen a tremendous outpouring from our families to support our families that are struggling, whether it's through donations for food. Carl's been able to send grocery bags home with families on the weekends, to school materials. I think just whatever people need, folks have stepped up. So I think it just it speaks volumes about the Milford community.
Well, I was just amazed because, Lisa's got everything on her plate. And then we found a family who had walked from Pheasant Hill all the way up to the high school, and the kids had no coats.
Right.
They had sweaters.
Yep.
We didn't know what to do. It's like, you don't want to believe this happens in Milford. But somebody mentioned that Lisa was helping families, like you said. Next thing I know, somehow she's finding a way of getting the doors open, and Lexus went down and got coats, and the kids were a little warmer. It doesn't seem like a lot, but to those kids,
oh, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And they've done everything from, I think you remember early on in the pandemic, toilet paper was, in scarce supply. So we were passing out, rolls of toilet paper at the grab and go, hygiene supplies. I think just anything to meet people's basic needs. And, it sounds silly, but these things really, really make a difference for somebody who, falls on hard times for whatever reason.
Or it's just getting started.
Right. Correct.
When our parents came over, my grandparents to Milford, my grandfather showed up with $38.22 in his pocket. And every penny he could save, he would save it because he would send it back to his wife and 3 daughters, so that they could live a little better. So, that was 1939, and the people in Milford they don't seem to have lost that spirit.
No, I think that's a consistent thing that we're seeing even today. And like you said, there's that myth of the self-made man. We all know that it takes a full community to kind of support and bring people, up and together. And that's really kind of what we're trying to do. And it's really the spirit of the foundation that Milford was built on. We've always been a community of immigrants. And whether they come from Portugal or Brazil or any other country in the world, the same kind of challenges and issues arise. If you come into America, in 1939, just speaking Portuguese, there's some barriers to kind of accessing just the society, and the schools work to provide English instruction and support in a number of different ways. But there's also a lot of those supports in the community and in the neighborhoods, and I think that still rings true today.
Well, we laugh, excuse me, we laugh at some of the stories, like Draper Corporation.
Mhm.
They built the Heights to help their workers.
Right.
God help them if they ever tried, although it was out of the goodness of their heart, where they set aside the sections. So they said, number 1, this the Heights through 30 are for Portuguese people. 31 through 60 are Italians. Can
Right.
you imagine? And what they were trying to do is make it easier for families who only spoke one language
Right.
to stay together, assimilate, and help each other. But can
Right.
you imagine me saying, I'm sorry, sir, you're Irish. You can't live in number 1 through 30.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
would, they would hung.
I don't know if that would fly today.
No, they'd be hung. Yet it really helped these families come in and start assimilating into Milford.
Mm-hmm. Because you
You
have
know,
people who've been there a couple of years longer. Somebody has a little more English, they can kind of, maneuver for you. I think some of that's still happening today, though. We're still seeing, some of that with just the way, new families are settling in the community.
well, the communities adapt. I mean, when I worked at Waters many, many decades ago, my mother was working in assembly, and they were talking about how they had efficiency engineers come in and lay out the assembly line. And I started laughing, and they said, "What's so funny?" I said, "They don't listen to you."
Uh-huh.
The grandmothers, the Portuguese mothers, they have their own way of doing things. When we had weddings, certain people made certain foods.
Right.
So you'd never make enough foulade because Maria Correa made the best there was. You'd never make bolos de bacalhau, the codfish cakes, because it
Mhm.
was all divvied out.
And
So,
someone would really have to die to get replaced, probably,
oh
right?
God, it would be a family insult. But it was so funny because when they asked me, how do I know? I said, watch them carefully. And they had an underground conveyor belt where they just slid each other's stuff.
Hmm.
And when they said, oh no, they're following the SOPs. And I laughed. I said, you realize 2 of the people there can't read or write. And they said, well, that's impossible. They couldn't pass the test. And I'll never forget because I said, just out of curiosity, were they singing while the other people were taking the test? And I was like, well, yeah, we thought that was just, part of a culture. I said, no, they're singing the answers, you dummy. But productivity wise, they were the best group there was.
Yeah,
And that,
absolutely.
and that to me is Milford, everybody helping each other.
Hey, you bring up Waters, and I actually want to give Waters a little bit of a shout out. They provided a huge donation to Milford and 4 other school districts around PPE, which and when I say donation, I'm saying like 5 or 6 pallets of hand sanitizer, gloves, masks,
Wow.
goggles for our lab. So we're definitely indebted to the Waters Corporation. They've been a great partner for us.
Well, it's funny, for years, the people there, the Art Caputos of the world, did so much for the town, but refused to take any credit.
Hmm.
You never saw Waters out front of the marching band. But if you look behind, they were the ones that funded it.
And they're still doing so much. We've got so many kind of partnerships with them in terms of like internships for our students. They've sent some of their scientists into our schools to kind of do presentations and programs. We did a big project with them. one of the hotels in Framingham where we had about 300 kids and about 50 scientists, and they were building. They were basically doing an experiment to try to, I think, carry like see how much weight they could hold based on the like particular materials they were using. It was just a fantastic opportunity for our woodland students.
Well, they got me started back when I was 19 years old. They gave me an internship in the lab, and that started me off. I'll never forget how well they treated me. Now,
Yeah, and that holds true today.
when we talk about the kids have been gone for a better part of a year. They're coming back. How they doing?
They're doing pretty good. I would say, overall, I think the students are pretty resilient. And I think there's going to be, I think our students that have historically struggled are probably going to be a little bit further behind because they're just not, they're just not accessing the resources in the same way some of our other students are. But I think overall, I'd have to say like the students are doing pretty well. And I've had the opportunity, my office is right in the high school. So whenever I travel down to see either Pete Boucher in the athletic office, Josh Otlin in his office, Lee Wayne Gordon, who's our director of nursing, who I see almost once a day, for the past, year and change, I'm able to kind of have conversations with our students. And generally, they're pretty optimistic. They're doing well. We're seeing, our kids starting to, the college acceptances are rolling in for our high school students. Our elementary students are, kind of engaging in what's happening in the classroom. So I think overall, I think the students are going to bounce back from this. And I think in some ways better than some of the adults will, because I think kids are just generally a little more resilient than we are. But I think overall, I'd say our students are doing, I think pretty well. And it's going to take a little time for some of them to, catch up and get back to some of the things that they missed. But I would say overall, I think we're heading in the right direction. The kids are pretty positive.
How about the seniors applying to college? Did they lose out on anything being away for a year?
I don't think so. I think we're seeing a pretty similar kind of, college like acceptance lists. Like we've got some students, being accepted to some of the most selective schools. We've got a lot of our students going to, state schools throughout New England. So I think it's pretty similar. A lot of the schools, colleges and universities moved test optional because it was so hard to, get a slot for an ACT or an SAT, and they're getting canceled all the time because of, COVID issues. So, overall, I think the kids, pretty similar to what we typically do. One thing we're disappointed about is we've been able to develop a pretty robust kind of internship, business and banking program. And a lot of those relationships and internships we had to put on pause because a lot of businesses, either were working remotely or weren't taking, non-employees into buildings. So we're hopeful that those programs can kind of, restart and kind of, because they were moving in a very nice trajectory. But I would say overall, the students, we're seeing a lot of top colleges and universities. And I think the kids are doing okay. I'm hopeful that we can have a more normal senior week. Like last year we did kind of a car parade, and we did have graduation, and we did have the Dick Corbin, but we couldn't do things like the prom, the senior carnival, and some of those things. And hopefully some of that comes back. I think, we're still in a footloose kind of situation where there's no dancing, but that might change, because things are changing pretty rapidly.
Well, now, when we start looking at the colleges,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's face it, our school committee, our school administration, parents like me, we all have a jaundiced view. We think our kids are the best there are, and we should.
Yep.
But the ultimate judge in my mind has always been the colleges.
Mm-hmm.
We can say anything we want about how great Milford kids are. If the colleges don't accept them, then that says something different. How are the kids doing about getting accepted to the schools they want?
I think pretty well. One of the things we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years is that the selective colleges are becoming even more selective, where, everybody talks about Harvard and it's in our backyard, but Harvard at one point was accepting 10 to 15% of applicants, and now they're down to 3 or 4% of applicants. So, even if you're a valedictorian with a 1580 on your SATs, you still probably only have a 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 chance of getting in. So, but even that being said, we're still seeing, students regularly get into, Ivy League schools, the NESCAC schools like Bowdoin, Bates, places like that. Some of our top technical schools in the country, we always send students to, WPI, RPI, but, schools like that. We usually get, a student into Holy Cross every year. I know that's near and dear to your heart. So, I think we're seeing a pretty good, representation. We've had, a number of our students are getting into some of the top schools in the country. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot of our student athletes are playing at the next level. Whether it's at the Division 1, 2, or 3 level, we're seeing a lot of our students, participating athletically, and I think that's helping. That's always that always supports the college admissions program if you bring a particular skill, as well as our music program. We see a lot of our musicians, move on to the college level too, and perform in marching bands or string quartets or that sort of thing at the next level, which speaks to both our athletics and our arts programming.
Well, my hat is always tipped to Pete. Good AD Boucher.
Yep. He's fantastic.
He made his impression on me when he corrected me once and said, I don't have athletes, I have student athletes. Emphasis on academics first.
100%.
And, I just thought that was superb because, again, my cousin used to be the premier kicker in Milford.
Mm-hmm.
When he kicked 48-yard field goals, and he got a full ride to Brown from Milford High for his kicking ability.
Mm-hmm.
And then he told me, he says, I used to be the guy who stood there and let everybody kick and then moved 5 yards behind them
mm-hmm.
and kicked over them.
Yeah.
He went out for the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
He said, boy, was that humbling. All of a sudden, there's 10 people behind me.
Right.
And here's a guy that set all these records. And I mean, he did well. He got full college scholarship at Brown.
Which is awesome.
But at the end, he studied and became vice president of J&J. So
mm-hmm.
It all played out. But it really put in perspective that when he went to try out for the NFL, he said, I couldn't even meet the ante.
Yep.
I wasn't even table stakes, never mind in the old days where I could, up the bid every time.
Well, and it speaks to just how competitive, whether it's, your most selective schools or athletics, to just, even to get, and I don't want to say even, but to jump on a Division 3 team, it's just so competitive to get there. And we have so many kind of dedicated, as Pete said, student athletes who are students first because, and I love that NCAA commercial where it says, 99% of our athletes become, go pro in something other than sports.
Right.
And that's 100% the truth. Most of our athletes will have a great experience in college and will, leverage that education to hopefully a very successful career.
Well, and it's tough because I know I had a 40+ hour a week job just trying to keep up with the academics at school. I can't imagine these kids who layer on a 40-hour a week practice schedule.
Oh yeah, and it's like having 2 full-time jobs. It's crazy. But we have so many. I think we have at least 10 of our football players that are going to be playing college football somewhere next year.
But see,
it's awesome.
When Pete talks to me about the discipline he's teaching them so that when they get to college, they can do both. They can be proud of having a good experience in academics, but still understand that athletics, like you said, they'll go pro, but 99.9% of them will be not in the sport.
Yeah, you're going to be an accountant, a scientist, a lawyer, a teacher, or something along those lines.
Now, one of the old traditions in my house, when we first started, my mother would go to the newspaper and circle all the people on the honor roll that were Portuguese in name. And I remember her getting excited when it went over 10, and then it was over 25. It's still something I do today as I look. And again, there's a pride in seeing the community that I grew up in, more and more and more names joining that list. And names that, my granddaughter, my grandson are going to go to school in Milford, and their name, Forget, is not very Portuguese. So, the names, there's 1 or 2 more behind it. But
right.
I noticed that people are talking about there's a huge number of kids compared to what, at least the impression, compared to before the pandemic that made the honor roll and high honors. Is that just an impression?
It's probably a little bit higher, I would say. We're seeing a lot of our students really kind of, and not just get good grades, but get good grades in challenging courses. Like we have a lot of our students who are taking, multiple advanced placement courses, early college courses through, Mass Bay, Framingham State, or LaSalle, Project Lead the Way STEM courses where they're, engaging in, college level work, and colleges recognize, the courses with college credits. So I think we're seeing, some higher achievement, but we're also seeing, I think the kids taking, a rigorous course load, which is setting them up for success in the future. Now, one of the downsides of the pandemic is some of our students who have, were struggling prior to the pandemic because of the virtual classes and some of the changes, I think struggled a little bit more. And we're going to be working very hard over the next couple of years to kind of, get them back on track to graduate and set them up hopefully for success in the future as well.
So overall, do you think we're as strong as before, stronger, or trying to get as strong?
I think we're getting ready to rebound. I think a lot of schools across the country, not unique to Milford, but I think the pandemic hit some folks hard, and some of the challenges were tougher for some folks, and I think it's going to take a little bit of time to get them back on track. But I'm very optimistic that we can do that.
But now, Kevin, the English as a second language kids, is it hitting them harder because we want them to learn English so they assimilate faster? But if they're left home, I can laugh because it was my darling bride when she first came to my house that looked at me and said, "Do you ever speak to your parents in English?" And I immediately, my visceral reaction was, "Of course, no, only when there are people around who don't speak Portuguese."
Right. And so I think what we're going to see is typically we see a higher percentage of students kind of test out of the English learner program, and that number is going to be a little bit lower because last spring, as well as for different points of this year, we were fully remote, and there wasn't the same level of kind of engagement. And even when students were in school, there was fewer students there. They were interacting with different groups less frequently because we were trying to keep cohorts together. So we just saw, I think there was fewer opportunities for real, English language development, the opportunities to kind of have those conversations, not with your parents where you're speaking English and not Portuguese, so I think there is going to be, again, I think a little bit of the need to rebound, kind of reset and kind of move the kids back on track. But we're going to be offering, programming this summer. We offered some programming over April vacation, and due to some federal grants, we're going to be able to offer some enhanced after school programming that, again, is hopefully going to get both our English learners and our, native speakers who are struggling kind of back on the right track and in the right direction.
How are the grants doing? I mean, in the past, we've been very lucky, but I wonder if so much money is going towards COVID and PPE. Are we still getting grants for, I guess I call it normal academic activities?
Yeah, one thing I'll say is, Nancy Angelini, who was our longtime principal of Stacy Middle School, is leading our technology department right now. But part of that role is grant writing, and she's, the best way to describe her, is a rainmaker. She's brought in, tens of thousands of dollars for, food for the community. We wrote a grant last year for, I want to say about 150,000 for career readiness programming for our middle school. There's, she wrote some grants for Carla to get ovens for the kitchen. So like all kinds of, whether it's academic programming, basic needs for the community, or, some infrastructure. She's done an amazing job of bringing resources in.
I was amazed when I heard we got all new microwaves and ovens. How do you write a grant for that?
It's just connecting. Like there's a lot of resources out there, and it's just really doing the due diligence of figuring out, what philanthropic organizations, have similar goals that we can connect with. Like we've got a program called ST Math that we've worked with this foundation called the 1-8 Foundation that, has supported that programming for several years for us. We've added, we're going to be adding a new science curriculum that's been, grant supported. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of, figuring out the right combination of what to write and how to kind of state your case and make your case. And it's building those relationships with the, the foundations and the, different state agencies. And Nancy does a great job with that. Like, she's been able to, like, we've done a lot of work with the YMCA around the, the meals program. And we've got, that we're going to be working with them. So we typically run a program for, our students with special needs, as well as our English learners in the summer, and we're connecting that to a YMCA summer camp program. So they're in either the ESL or the special education programs in the morning, and then they're doing like a camp type program in the afternoon. So, and that's all grant funded and free for everybody.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah. So I think the money has been, we've had a really successful year from a grant writing perspective.
Now it's hit the paper that the budget is bigger than ever. And there's new initiatives coming in. You want to toot your own horn and talk to us about some of the new initiatives?
Yeah. So, this year, and I've got to say that, Milford, and we've talked about this at length, and we, sometimes we're on the opposite side at the finance committee meetings, but we always leave as friends. But we're adding 34 new positions. The vast majority of them are teaching positions. And it's a combination of, the last few years we've been very heavy in our English learner asks, because that population has been growing pretty significantly in town. But this year it's a combination of a lot of different positions. So we're adding STEM programming at the elementary level. So that's science, technology, engineering, and math. So the students are going to be able to go to a STEM special and work on really hands-on science-related projects. We're adding a STEM teacher at the middle school. That program has been in place for, I want to say, about 5 or 6 years now, and I think it's going to be expanding. So we're really excited about that. And we're doing Project Lead the Way projects in those classes. So students are kind of engaging in some really high-level, like inquiry-based science projects. We're adding a number of academic positions at the high school, a director of literacy in ELA to kind of be the counterweight for our math director, who's been very successful and I think is going to make a lot of positive changes to our math programming across the district. So hopefully we're going to see similar results with literacy and ELA. So very, very excited. A couple of additional EL teachers and a couple of additional special education teachers, just based on, changes in population and growth in population. But we're really, really excited about, all the positions. And I think, we haven't gone through town meeting yet, but I'm looking forward to the, the support of the community, which has been incredibly generous to the schools. And I think, is why our schools are, I think is well regarded as they are.
Well, I mean, we got a new science lab coming in.
Absolutely, and we're very, very excited about that. It's phase 2 of a process, and it's going to provide kind of state-of-the-art lab experiences for our students. So our students are going to be working on equipment that is going to be as good or better than in any high school, and in some cases colleges in the country. So it's going to allow the students, instead of watching a video on the Chromebook, to actually engage in the work directly, which I think, and you're in the science field, you know how much more meaningful that's going to be.
Well, I was really happy when we got the proposal, because too many times you get proposals from institutions and they have it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then year 2, the maintenance comes up, and year 3, and pretty soon everything's mothballed because you don't have money.
Right.
I was impressed with their science staff that they put in, I think it was 5 years of consumables and service to make sure that at least for 5 years, the lab would be up and running.
Yeah, one thing we've learned, and I give Cicely Tucker and the science department a lot of credit, and we got a lot of feedback from a number of different folks. I think yourself included, Al, on the material that we were bringing in. But we really try to make things sustainable, because if you have something that you're able to use for 1 year, that's great. But the kids who come next, and the kids who come after that, and the kids who come after that, it's not helpful for them. So whatever we do, we want to make it long-term sustainable. And that's really the goal. And I think these upgrades to the science labs and the equipment that we're bringing in is going to give kind of a world-class science experience to all of our students, which we're really, really excited about. And we're seeing tremendous interest in the sciences, and we've got, again, a series of Project Lead the Way courses, AP courses. We have, a very, very well-developed technology and computer program. Dan Nelson runs a tech team that, last year, again, like a lot of things, we had to put it on pause, but he has a group of students that do a lot of the repairs and, both to the actual devices as well as, supporting our network, helping teachers troubleshoot problems, which, I think is unique to our district in a lot of ways. So we have a lot of just great opportunities for our students, as well as in the programming area and engineering.
Well, I've seen a very helpful change in attitude, because for the longest time, the past few decades, people viewed computers as permanent purchases.
Right, right.
It's like, well, wait a minute, we bought you a set of new computers 12 years ago.
Right.
Why do you need new ones now?
Right. And again,
I was going to say, I saw Kathy building in the network, the infrastructure. That's critical, because you could have the greatest, it's like saying, I've got the greatest engine in my car and I have no tires.
Right.
It's hard to get to go anywhere.
Right. And we've really developed, I think, a nice system between, the work that Kathy Perry has done, Nancy Angelini, and some of our principals to say that, hey, here's our refresh program for our devices, but, also here's our refresh program for our network. And you're familiar with the federal E-rate program. We've got kind of our network upgrades lined up with like the E-rate cycle. So about every 3 to 5 years, we're able to make kind of the necessary adjustments. So, we're not working on, a Commodore, what was it, 64 or 128 or whatever they were called. And we have, students have, good working devices, as well as a network that's going to support those devices.
Well, and I think it's key that people just understand that 3 to 5 years, we used to take the high school and give them to the middle school to the elementary school. And by the time it got down there, I remember my youngest come home one day and said, well, I got to do this work here. I said, well, you got a whole media center. She's like, Dad, that's a chisel and rocks. We're chiseling tablets at the speed that those computers work.
Right. And, computers now, technology is embedded in everything that we do. And so we're even starting, and I think the pandemic accelerated this a little bit. At the K2 level, we had a few carts that teachers were using, and now we have a device for every student. And I think it's good practice for our students to, not play like video games, but to engage in computers in a way that's, kind of pre-academic or academic work. And I think it's going to really accelerate the development and particularly the typing skills, which, our middle school teachers would lament. People would say, hey, the kids are great at computers, and the middle school teachers would say, hey, but they can't type. They type 5 words an hour. So if they're writing a 3-page paper, it takes them 6 days. But now I think they're starting to get those keyboarding skills because they're starting earlier.
Well, it was amazing when we were at Stacy, when I was a kid, we took a typing course. And everybody kept saying, why are you bothering taking a typing course? And now I can't imagine what it would be like if I couldn't type.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I was, my grandfather was a court stenographer, so he could type like, 300 words a minute. He was incredible. And he would, my first couple of years, and this is right when computers were starting to come in, and I took a typing class in college or in high school, but like my skills just weren't there. So he would I'd write the papers up and he would type them up for me. And, and now on the computer, you can kind of make a mistake, go back and make adjustments. But back in the day, you'd have to get, the old correction tape, pull it out. And, mistakes were much more costly back then.
Well, now I hear that we have a new principal that you've added.
Yeah, we're very excited. It's new to Stacy, but not new to Milford. So Caridad Lopez, who was one of our assistant principals at Woodland Elementary School, has moved up to the principal at Stacy Middle School. So we're very excited that Caridad is joining. She's spending a little bit of time each week at Stacy, getting to know the faculty, getting to know the students. Actually, she knows all the students because they came through they came through Woodland, so they're always excited to see her when she pops over. But she's really excited. I think she's going to be a great fit. We also added Rachel Driscoll, who was a longtime assistant principal at Memorial Elementary School, is shifting back up to the Stacy team. She started her career at Stacy as an English teacher, and she's heading back up there to join that team. So we're also very excited about that.
Oh, that's good news. It's good to see people in the system moving up.
100%. So we're thrilled that both Kari Dodd and Rachel are going to be joining that team at Stacy.
So now we'll hit on a tender subject. A few years ago, we finished Woodland, and FinCom recommended we put money away in the stabilization account. And somebody, I got hit with, "What are you doing? Why would you put money away?" I said, "There's a school coming." And they said, "We just finished one." I said, "Yeah, and there's another one coming. And I believe the next one on your list is Milford High."
It is. And you've seen some of the price tags for some of the high school projects out there. They're daunting big numbers. Actually, this Thursday, it's on the school committee agenda. We're talking about submitting a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which involves a positive vote from both the school committee and the selectmen. So I think if the school committee green lights it to move forward, we'll start those conversations with the selectmen. One of the most important things for folks out in greater Milford to hear is that it's almost as hard to get your MSBA statement of interest accepted on the first run as it is to get into an Ivy League school. The rates of acceptance are below 20% on projects, and it's a function of there's a certain pool of money out there, and there's a certain number of projects that they can fund, and it's driven by a number of things. One of the advantages we're going to have is our roof, which is a significant project, is coming up to the end of its useful life in the next couple of years. So that may accelerate us on the list potentially. But I don't want people to get their hopes up to think that in 2 years we're going to start breaking ground on a new high school. It's possible it could be anywhere from 2 to 6 years where that project can get off the ground. But we're starting to really kind of accelerate and take engage in the process a bit more seriously, because you and I have talked several times over the last couple of years about that potential. And if they accept our statement of interest, the next phase is a feasibility study, which has to a town meeting vote has to come before that. The last time we did it was about $1 million for Woodland. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's probably a little bit more than that now. I think it's probably less than 2 million, but more than 1 million. It's probably going to fall somewhere in that between those two numbers.
Well, it was funny because when people said we need to get these schools rolling, I agree, but rolling is probably 8 years away.
Right.
Because again, as you said, the state has not increased the building pool significantly. And you go another 5, 8 years and schools all across, 300 cities and towns in Massachusetts get a little older.
Right.
Now, in your mind, do you have any preference to new versus renovating?
I love the Woodland project. Like the new Woodland is an awesome building. The one reason why I think a renovation may take place at the high school is because we probably lose a ton of square footage if we went new. And there's questions about the pool. There's some appetite for a field house, and some of those projects would be outside of the scope of even a new building. So, maybe if we do, some kind of like renovation with a field house, that might be a little more palatable and, maintain kind of the footprint of the building as well. But we'll see. That's why we do the feasibility study.
My biggest concern, well, obviously the money.
Absolutely.
When I see a renovation probably costing us 150 plus million, but I see these new schools. We used to make fun of Newton North, wondering what kind of narcotics were the architects on when they put up $200 and some million proposal.
And that seems like a deal now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You start talking about Waltham and places, and 200 million is not a shocker anymore.
No, and even the Woodland project, Northbridge just did a similar building that's very similar in scope, and it came in, I think, 30 or 40% higher than what Woodland is coming in at. So, um, the cost of construction is going up, which is, nothing new, but it's just the high school is a substantial project, and we're gonna go through the process, do our due diligence and be, very thoughtful about it throughout, from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to squeeze every penny, but giving up the Milford pool just seems
Yeah.
like a tragedy.
No, we can't do that either. We're gonna have to, that's something and it's part of our physical education program, so it'll be part of the project.
And giving up the auditorium, not just for the school, but you think how many people had their first dance recital there, watching,
Absolutely.
watching my daughter be, I think it was a rock or a mushroom. To me, she was on Broadway.
Those are big. There's no small parts, Al.
Yeah, but all of that, one thing that I don't understand is where we could build a new high school. The only dirt we have that's big enough is probably Asylum Street.
Right.
But
And when you think about parking, you think about athletic fields.
you think about access roads, you think about
Yeah.
kids having to get on the bus 20 minutes or 15 minutes earlier. So that didn't make sense. And then I think when we did Brookside, the only way we pulled off Brookside is we built half a school.
Hmm.
We had 300 kids that we had to put somewhere. And, the high school got enlarged, classroom wise, memorial. We built half a school.
Hmm.
Where would you put 1,200 kids?
Well, that's a great question. Um, if you asked me that question a year ago, I would say nowhere. Obviously, we're not going to go remote again because that's crazy. Um, but I think again, it's probably going to be we build a couple wings, we move students into the wings, and we kind of shift around like that. So there'll probably be, even though it's a renovation, there'll probably be a fair amount of new construction connected to it because I think we'll have to kind of rotate the students through as the the new wings get built if we do move in the direction of a renovation.
And this sounds kind of ironic that I'm bringing it up. We haven't added 1 square foot to the high school in 40 some years.
Correct. And then the student population has grown a little bit. But again, we have more square footage per student at the high school than we do anywhere else in the district.
Yeah, and you brought up we'd lose space because
100%, because the formulas are very different than what they were.
right away, I mean, even at Woodland, we couldn't have an auditorium. So we came up with, God bless the people in their creative imagination, the cafetorium.
Which is one of my least favorite words in the English language, but it actually works. And we could put on a Broadway production at Woodland based on the systems that are in place there. And really the cafeteria does transform into a pretty nice theater. Even the cafeteria table shift to benches with backs, if you want to do a performance in the evening. And the custodians are almost like a NASCAR pit team. They can kind of shift it within a couple of hours. It's incredible.
But I look at what we have. The pool, the cafeteria will always be there, but we don't have to share that to make it an auditorium. It's
Right.
great that you have a great pit crew, but they can be doing other things.
And I think at the high school level, you really want that theater experience because we have a very well developed, uh, drama program, musical theater program, music program, and we have performances going on in a typical year all throughout the year, whether it's the band playing, a play, a musical. We have, dance recitals going on the weekends, all different kinds of things going on in there. So it's used, and as you know, that building's used 24/7.
The one thing I'd love to see is a field house. It's the one piece that when I go to like Shrewsbury and other places and see what they built for their athletes indoors, I'm jealous.
Mm-hmm.
And
And our outside facilities, I'll put them up against anybody. The turf field that we have, and some of the other outdoor facilities that we have, they're as good as any place else, and in some cases, much better than a lot of places. But a field house would be awesome if we could add that. And if we can upgrade our pool area a little bit as part of the renovation. We're already the regional site for swim meets and district meets and all those kinds of things. So we'd like to continue that tradition as well.
And a lot of it too is you look at the Special Olympics programs. The swim coach can have a program,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so much easier if all the kids are home.
Right.
If we had to drive 5 miles or so, it just adds a logistical nightmare.
100%. So it's convenient to be able to just have the students just go right into the pool on site, and it's a great facility.
And I mean, I hate to admit it, but I guess I don't hate to admit it. It's nice to see visitors come and envy Milford. Because you got all these parents from the towns around us, and when they come in and they see the pool, you can see the envy, which is nice.
It is nice, and Al, I got to tell you, Chappie and Lenmore Cone we were one of 3 sites in the state that was able to host swim meets this year. And, we had teams kind of shuffling in and out and maintaining distancing, and you're not really racing against anybody, but, except for the clock, because we can't put people next in lanes, but they made it work. And again, we were one of, I think 3 sites statewide where meets were held this year.
Kevin, any last words for the viewers?
The only thing I'll say is I really want to thank our parents and our faculty for, I think, working through a very, very, very difficult year. And I think people did it with grace, with patience, with flexibility, and most importantly, with passion. And I'm excited to have kind of a strong finish to the school year, and hopefully a normal start to next fall.
And we started spring sports.
We did. We're very excited about that. We've got lacrosse, baseball, track and field, volleyball, all even wrestling. Wrestling has moved to the spring this year, so we're really excited about keeping our athletes moving, and it's been great. The first couple of days have been awesome.
I didn't bring it up because I figure Pete's coming on the show in a couple of weeks, and you can't stop him from showing the pride he has. He
is a ball of enthusiasm and energy, and I'm proud to have him as our athletic director because, he really deeply cares about the kids and deeply cares about having programs that can compete with anybody in the country.
Well, look forward to talking to you when we start talking about coming back for the fall.
I'll be here, Al. It's always a pleasure.
End of summer. We'll have a show by the end of the school year as we get into summer.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Kevin. And
all right, thanks, Al.
To our 6 loyal viewers, as always, thanks for joining. May God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today. And as always, if you have questions, if you have any doubts, you need to talk to somebody, contact the schools, because the people up there have shown time and time again that they're willing to go out of their way, whether it's a Lisa Kincaid getting a coat in the middle of the night for 3 kids, whether it's people helping students assimilate. They try and they do little miracles, and little things like giving a cold child a coat may not seem like a lot, but she didn't have to get up in the middle of the night to help us. She did willingly, and that's the spirit of the Milford school system. So as always, good night, God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night, all.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just